One of the most important things, like going through a divorce, is to be able to celebrate who you are and what you did in the marriage. I'm Joey Chandler. I call myself a celebration coach. I help people figure out who they are, what they're about, how they do things, and then use celebration to actually move themselves forward.
Say a little bit more about celebration coach. What does that mean? What does that look like?
Core values describe who you are. Your core process describes how you operate. And what I found is that most everybody, usually at the end of their process, is some version of a celebration, like, hey, we did this thing, like, great job. So many people, and myself included, we could never get to celebration. We would always put it off. We would always have to wait till like things got better. And so by the time we actually got to the celebration part, we were too exhausted, frustrated, overwhelmed to do anything about it. So we would just go into the next thing. And so we wouldn't get any of the benefits of celebration. And I did this with clients first and then myself. I said, okay, hey, let's just move celebration to the front. Let's celebrate you, what you've done first, and then go into whatever it is you got to do. And that has made a massive difference in my life, my clients. And so I started talking about it. It was actually on a podcast. This guy's like, I get core values and I get core process, but you should just be a celebration coach because that's just different. And you talk about it in a way that no one else does. And this is one reason why it's so important to talk about who you are and what you're about and share who you are, because sometimes other people can hear things about you that you can't. Celebrating yourself, what you want, what's important to you is, I think, huge. And then the other part is to be able to look back and say, hey, what did I learn? So easy to get caught up in the everything sucks and they suck and I suck and marriage sucks and it's so easy to get in all that. And you just overlook all the things that you learned about yourself, relationships, being a parent, being, whatever that is. If you can start to own all of that, that will give you a foundation for moving forward. And it doesn't mean that those things don't suck, but it just gives you a stronger foundation.
How do you get there if you're a dad who is really, really suffering, really in his head about to get him somewhere where there's a little bit more power, a little bit more freedom?
It's not just celebrating yourself saying, oh, like, hey, you did a great job. Like, that's what there is to do then is, and you create what I call your core process. So you sit down and you say, okay, when you first work with somebody, what do you do? And it's probably going to be something like you get to know them, you connect with them, some version of that. And then after that, what do you do? And that's probably going to be you figure out their goals. And then you figure out the plan that they need to fulfill those goals. And then you're like, what actions can we take? And then what celebration, can we do for those actions? So you come up with these 5 steps. And those are, and the language changes and they're all, key to who you are, but you get this process. And then for me, I say you move celebration to the front. So if I'm working with somebody who's, in it, let's just say, we figure out their process, and let's just assume that they have their process that's similar in language to that one. You would say, hey, okay, what can you celebrate about right now? And that answer is going to be different for everybody. Like for me, I was married for 17 years. That took work. That was not a small thing. And I raised a great son. And there's things that I can celebrate about myself to honor and acknowledge. And then we say, okay, what's the current status? What are you in? And then they would describe whatever that is. And then we would say, okay, what's your goal? And this is the great part because this is a process. When you're in it, when you're when you're in it, your goal may be like, I just want to make it to next week. I don't want to hurt anybody because I'm so angry. And whatever you're at is perfect. You just like, that's the goal. You say, okay, what's your plan and what action can you take today? And they would come up with some steps. And then the next day, they can celebrate that. I didn't yell at anyone today. I'm going to celebrate that. And then you go through the process again. So what I do with my guys is I have them journal every day. And what that does is just moves them forward, has them take baby steps, builds up their confidence. And then over time, they start to see, okay, what is it that I really want to create? So it's like baby steps, but no matter where people are at, there's always something that they can celebrate.
Your energies changes once you can tap into actually that is worthy of celebration.
This morning, I woke up in a funk. I was pissed off about something and I went through and I journaled my process and I was looking at what can I celebrate about yesterday. And in my funkness, I had forgot that I'm working on a book. I had forgot that I had reached out to a Facebook group saying, "Hey, I could use some help with some editing," and I had 3 people, say, "Hey, I can help you out." In my funk, I forgot about that, but my practice of looking at Celebration reminded me of that. And I was like, "Wait, that's actually kind of cool." I moved my book forward in a way that I wasn't present to. That gave me a little more energy. Just it just allows you to move forward. But it's the practice of celebration. It's not just like, rah, rah, rah. It's a practice of celebration, understanding how that works in your system and using it every day that makes the difference. Sometimes a win, a celebration can be not doing something as much as doing something. And, if you don't turn on TikTok and spend 8 hours scrolling, if you walk out of a situation where you normally might have yelled and you take a breath and you walk out, that is worth celebration. And to be clear, when I talk about celebration, I'm not saying like you need a parade because you didn't buy a bottle of wine. Like that's not what I'm talking about. But because you had the wherewithal to say, "Hey, this is important to me. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do this instead," that ought to be acknowledged. That ought to be celebrated in some way. You don't need a parade, but you could use a pat in the back and just owning it. And by owning it, you actually give yourself all sorts of dopamine releases and all sorts of positive benefits that give you the foundation for moving forward.